and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Rafae Iqbal, and today we'll be talking on a very important issues that we saw today. First was the convening of the National Assembly session, and of course we saw that the President had delayed the assent to the summary for the calling of the National Assembly session. This was the 16th National Assembly session that was to be called today, the maiden session. And of course, we saw that the President was hesitant as he insisted on the allocation of the reserve seats, and he was waiting on the ECP to allocate the reserve seats so that the session of the National Assembly could be called on. As we saw today, that the oath-taking process under Article 65 of the Constitution, the outgoing Speaker, Raja Pervez Ashraf, administered the oath to the newly elected members. We saw some very prominent names taking their oath today. We saw that the three-time former Prime Minister of the country, Nawaz Sharif, along with the nominated Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif. We saw from the PPP, Asif Ali Zardari and Bilawal Bhutto. From JUIF, we saw Maulana Fazlur Rahman, along with a lot of other members. From Sunni Ittehad Council, we saw Sher Afzal Marwat, Ali Muhammad Khan, Umar Ayub and Barrister Gohar in the House today. And there was a lot of sloganeering, there was a lot of protest as also seen. There were security issues as well as seen in the KP Assembly earlier, and that is why VIP passes had been cancelled in the last moment. But considering all the situation, the President did finally give his assent to the summary which called on the National Assembly session, as the National Assembly session would have been called by the National Assembly Secretariat, and they had issued a notification in that regard. In the studios, we have been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi, and we have been joined by Raja Faisal, who is a geopolitical analyst. And of course, we'll also be joined on Skype by Barrister Safi Ghauri. We'll also discuss the ECP's decision that they have reserved regarding the reserved seats of the Sunni Ittehad Council, and the petition that had been filed by the Sunni Ittehad Council in the ECP. And the other parties, the PMLN, the PPP, JUIF, had opposed to the allocation of reserve seats to the Sunni Ittehad Council, as they stated that the SIC was not a parliamentary party. I'd like to move towards Barrister Safi Ghauri first, considering the National Assembly session, which was convened today. And under Article 51 and 53, the elections for the Speaker and Deputy Speaker were also to be called. And the provision in the Constitution which calls that the session of the First National Assembly will be called after 21 days of the holding of the general elections in the country. The President had his concerns regarding the reserved seats. What would you comment on that?
So thank you very much for having me on air. As far as the president's concern is concerned, I've watched it out previously as well, and I'll say it again. It was completely illegitimate. The role of the president in Pakistan is a titular role. This is a role that does not allow him to make decisions for himself. He is constitution bound to act on the advice of the prime minister, and this has been enunciated by the Supreme Court time and again, also very clearly written in the Constitution of Pakistan. So now that we know for a fact that, and even PTI, by the way, does not deny this. This is what's important to understand, that PTI does not defend the president withholding the summary by force. The summary was held of his own accord, which he has done in the past as well. If you recollect, in the past he dissolved the assemblies when he thought that there was a vote of no confidence that he did not like. In the past, we have seen him not give assent to bills, and therefore he has been accused even by the former Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of running the presidency like a PTI camp office, which is extremely unfortunate for a president to be doing. So once again, when it comes down to the issue of the reserve seats, the president did not have any powers to withhold his position. He's only a functionary in the sense that he is to act. He is duty bound to act on the advice of the prime minister. He should have called the session. Regardless, he delayed it. This would have led to an Article 6 proceeding against the president, as was mentioned by Bilawal Bhutto, for abrogation of the constitution. I am, however, very glad that the president at the 11th hour suddenly realized that he is possibly going to land himself in massive trouble. So he went back on his own stance and called the National Assembly session, which should have been called earlier. Regardless, he has narrowly dodged a bullet of an Article 6 case against him.
Right, Raja Faisal, what do you comment on that? First, as we know, does the Constitution provide immunity to the President in such a scenario as well, or do you think that the President has played a good shot for his safety?
You know, President played a good shot for his obviously political career, I must say. Reason being that in recent past, of course, there was too much of criticism which was being issued by PTI followers, and obviously the PTI supporters at large. They have been, condemning his role, President's role, because they believed that he could have done a lot, but of course he would only be doing what Constitution tells him to do. And as Barrister Safi has already mentioned, here he was wrong, and I think he realized it at the 11th hour, and that is why he recourse himself, and he has actually fixed himself wherever he was wrong. But to me, I think his decision to not call and to raise the issues related to the women seats and minority seats and these kind of issues which he was highlighting, it all had the political aspect of it. And I think he just wanted to portray himself that of course whatever he was doing in last 2 years, it was he was just being running himself and running his office in accordance to Constitution. But when he was wrong, he realized that he is wrong, and that is when he actually reversed himself and he fixed his stance related to it. I'm glad that it has happened today. I mean, the National Assembly's inaugural session we saw, it was bound to happen, and that is how the democratic countries should be behaving. And on Constitution Avenue, today we saw that the will of the people was there, and that will of the people, of course, it is going to form the government very soon, and very soon the core issues which are being faced by people of Pakistan at large, they will be getting sorted from this government, and I think that is the way to move on regarding this. And when it comes to obviously the quota seats of women seats and minorities, it can be of course later discussed, and but so far it was a good step forward that we saw the session taking place today.
Right, I'd like to move towards Mr. Farrukh Pitafi now, as we've heard two viewpoints from two analysts, Raja Faisal and Barrister Safi Ghauri. Mr. Farrukh, what would you say about the President's role in the convening of the National Assembly session, considering that he was insisting that the issue of reserved seats be resolved first and then the House proceeds with its proceedings?
Right, Rafi, thank you very much for the question. I think the way both my esteemed friends are actually talking about change of heart, something automatically changed, and he realized that he was erring, and then he corrected his course. Had it been not quarter to 12 when he actually signed the summary, but had it been 3 o'clock in the morning, which is usually generally thought to be the hour of divine inspiration, I would have perhaps agreed to this idea. But my humble submission is that of course there must be some kind of pressure. Somebody must have actually compelled him to realize that these were wrong things to do, or at least this is how constitutionally it is wrong, and he signed on this. Now, regardless of the character of President, I don't think that even if he had actually gotten away with this, that this would have incurred Article 6. Article 6 is that vestige in our Constitution that has been often referred to, but have never been used actually against anybody. So I don't think that this time it was automatically going to spring into action. But there is something else, Rafae, that we need to actually address now. Now that the Assembly is there, now that Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Prime Minister, and eventually President or new President are all going to be elected. The question right now is of how many dead ends there are in our procedures, in our Constitution. I think that PTI vote against PTI, vote of no confidence against PTI government, and
Right.
whatever has transpired since then has repeatedly brought us to these dead ends. That shows a characteristic lack of imagination on the part of the lawmakers. For example, if the president cannot do it or he refuses to do it, what is the automatic mechanism to ensure to call the assembly into session? Similarly, when a prime minister facing vote of no confidence actually moves a summary based on the speaker's ruling that the assembly should be dissolved, should it be an automatic process? And shouldn't there be any caveats that are in place to ensure that Deputy Speaker Suri actually does not go to that extent? All these things and what transpired in Punjab, what transpired in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where assemblies were just dissolved because the party's chair thought that it was prudent or expedient. All of these things pose serious questions. So I am hoping that this parliament, when it starts functioning properly, because today was essentially the inaugural session, and of course politics has become showbiz, in other words. But there's always, when the parliament starts, there's pageantry involved. And then, of course, there's this effort to show how loyal you are to your party. So that was what was going on in the parliament today. But eventually, when it starts functioning, you'll have to start addressing these dead ends, these lacunas which have to be fixed. If they are not, we will keep on repeating these problems again and again.
Right, Farrukh, just like you rightly pointed out, better late than never, the change of heart by the president. But considering today's session that we saw, there was a lot of sloganeering and there was a lot of protest from the opposition. We saw that there were people who were wearing the former PTI chairman's face masks. They were raising slogans and they were calling out all the other members of the parliament, the lower house of parliament. But Barrister Safi, Ghauri, I would like your insights on what Mr. Farrukh just mentioned, that there's some lacunas and there's dead ends. And we saw those lacunas in the parliament today. There was one side that was saying that the calling of the session today should not have been called until the issue of reserved seats had been cleared out. And subsequently, they were also talked about the election of the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker and the issues that would arise in these elections until the reserved seats issue has been resolved by the ECP. And the verdict has been reserved already, but what would you comment on the whole situation?
So, I mean, obviously, it's very obvious that the whole situation is very disappointing and extremely disgraceful. And the reason why I say this is because, on the one hand, I completely agree with what Farooq Saab said regarding the lacunas within the constitution. Our constitution clearly has a long way to go. But then I think it's the behavior of the politician that we really need to be talking about. Because who is it who's responsible for fixing the constitution? If there is a lacuna in this constitution right now, and we do not know the solution to this, so the matter has gone to the ECP and it will inevitably go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will decide, and then one party will be very unhappy with the decision whilst the other will praise the Supreme Court. Once again, we'll see a whole cycle of mudslinging on the superior judiciary. My question, Rafe, is very simple. What are the politicians doing about it? Why don't they just pass a constitutional amendment and
Precisely.
clarify whatever needs to be done? Why don't they just come into the parliament and discuss this? Instead of coming into the parliament and discussing legislations, what do we see? We see them throwing shoes at each other. We see them wearing face masks. We see them kicking, punching, pushing each other. If this is the behavior of the parliamentarians, how is it that we can expect them to do any good? Why do we even expect something of democracy? And why do we expect then that the superior judiciary, that other bureaucrats and other institutions like the army will not interfere within the affairs of the public if our politicians refuse to behave any older than a 6-year old? And we see this, it was very disgusting, to be honest. Everything that we saw today in the National Assembly, everything that we saw previously in the KPK Assembly, and then the ruckus that we saw in the Punjab Assembly, it makes me very, very disturbed, and it makes me very disappointed with whatever we think the democratic process is. Because the idea of democracy was very simple. It was that people will select good public representatives who represent them, and they will act in the common good of the people. Instead, what we see is very petty, egoistic politicians coming forward, the pettiest and the worst of them, the criminal minded people coming forward, with the sole aim of preserving their own power. So obviously, this disappoints, this hurts, and this is one of the reasons why we see this power struggle between institutions, because clearly the one institution that has been deemed to be the most supreme, which is the parliament, is simply unable to do what it's supposed to do. And once again, I do not blame the judiciary for passing, for overreaching, because think about it. Every major constitutional crisis that Pakistan has had has eventually been resolved in the Supreme Court. How many can you name that were actually resolved by the parliament themselves by sitting? And also, I mean, I think a special mention needs to be given to PTI here, which for some reason has become the only party that clearly states that in a democratic system they will not talk to any other party. And that's just very strange. Like, I cannot imagine how democracy is to work if one party is insisting that they will simply not communicate, they will not talk, they will not support, they will not participate in the system, and then they are a very popular party and they are perhaps winning the majority of the seats in Pakistan as well. So clearly we'll have problems. And
Right.
that's all that I have to say about it, Rafae.
Right, politics is the art of dialogue. Raja Faisal, what are your thoughts on it? And do you think that PTI should sit down with the other parties and talk in the parliament, rather, as they also mentioned that they would go to the Supreme Court if the ECP verdict is not in their favor?
You know, Rafi, as an independent observer, of course, I have been observing everything since almost 2 years. And whatever has been taking place, even at the time of, right at the end days of, PTI's government, I still remember that the issues related to whatever happened in Sindh House, then a few of the, members of parliament who were obviously associated with PTI, they left
Right.
PTI, and after that, whatever happened, we saw that. And at that time, of course, PTI maintained that it was the will of the people and it was the party that actually took the votes, and once they get into parliament, they switch sides and they easily help to remove the governments. So at that time it all started, and we saw that the party itself went through a lot. And then we saw that it was their constitutional right. Whatever they did in Punjab assembly, they left the assembly, they resigned from it, and of course they were expecting that within the time span of 3 months they would be having a provincial election in Punjab, which did not take place at that time. And then of course the setup was a very prolonged setup out there, and then whatever happened obviously related to, it was a disastrous day, 9th May, and whatever happened after that, PTI members, they feel that they were, subjected to an odd treatment. We know that whatever was taking place, it was obviously for a reason, and that reason was that whatever took place on 9th of May shouldn't have taken place, because the country like Pakistan, it's a democratic country, and this is not the way to protest. Going to institutions and the buildings
burning down a building.
Buildings that are important to not only the institution but the people of Pakistan as well. Definitely. Because people of Pakistan love that institution. So whatever happened at that time, of course it had a reaction, and that reaction has created rifts within of course PTI and the other parties as well. It has increased and increased and increased, and we did not see any time where when PDM government was obviously having a year and a half government, even they didn't try to that extent where they could calm it down at that time. And then we saw that this political turmoil actually created economic havoc for Pakistan, which we still experiencing. And whatever happened in today's session, it had a lot to do with that, and it had a lot to do whatever has happened during the election campaigns as well. We should not be forgetting that this was the party who was actually not given its symbol back, and they were not having a symbol. And at that time, of course, it was being it was being considered that they will not be achieving any sort of seats. So, but of course, they did really well. They are still, if we talk about the single largest party, I mean, they are single largest party, but of course they can't form a government because they don't want to sit with any of the parties that were part of PDM. And of course, what they want to do is they want to play the role, and they want to actually wait for their decisions, which of course they are expecting that they have the Form 45s, and this is what they believe, that the sanity would prevail and Form 45s of course would be respected, because it's not their own, it's not their Form 45s only. They believe the same Form 45s are with Jamaat-e-Islami, the same Form 45s are with TLP, the same Form 45s are with other candidates as well. I mean, few of the other independent candidates like Mustafa Khokhar, yes. I mean, the way he has come forward, this, and obviously both of his constituencies, they were the capital's constituencies. So these are serious issues, and all of these issues, they should have been sorted by now, and by the courts. I mean, the courts should have taken an initiative so that whatever is still happening concerning that, it shouldn't have taken place in the first session of the National Assembly. It should have been sorted before, so that nobody is having any ambiguity about whether they have the right to sit out there or not. Because in this case, of course, we know, I mean, seasoned politicians like Mia Mohammad Nawaz Sharif, three-time prime ministers. I mean, there are allegations raised by people, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, against his seat as well, which is very sad to see, because he is a politician that has given a lot to Pakistan, and his struggles for Pakistan, I mean, they are remarkable. Three-time Prime Minister of Pakistan, and these kind of allegations. So that is why I believe all of these things, they piled up, and whatever was happening out there on the Constitution Avenue, it had a lot to do with the last 2 years.
Well, no doubt about that. I think that where PTI has allegations against Nawaz Sharif also has allegations that his seat in NA15 Mansehra was rigged, and that he won the seat originally. But when we talk about allegations, anyone can hurl any allegation at anyone. Farrukh Pitafi, I'd like to ask you this. Considering that the President had a change of heart, there's a change of attitude, do you think the PTI should also have a change of attitude, considering the whole situation and considering the dynamics of the Parliament? Because we see that Nawaz Sharif, he had been the 3 times former Prime Minister, but he won't be a part of the government as a head. What would you comment about the whole political dynamics and how the PTI, as we also saw that a delegation of the PTI earlier met JUIF, however, even though they were saying in the past that they would not sit with these parties, but they did. What do you think, how important are these steps? How important is dialogue for PTI at this moment?
Right. Thank you very much once again. Originally I thought that I'm going to do what I usually don't do. I'm going to disagree with what Safi earlier said. Maybe I will try to actually come to that point later. But Raja Faisal has this graceful habit of, drawing a target on his own self. So I have to first turn around and actually move in that direction. Whatever PTI did, and you have to actually talk about that, whatever PTI is facing today, it is because of its own miscalculations. It's miscalculation because if you really believe that there is some kind of power dynamic where the state institutions play a role, one by one, systematically you alienated all the institutions. And then you try to actually campaign based on that as a victim of the whole situation. You kept on actually, pulling out of the system, for example, just to ensure that Shah Mahmood Qureshi does not replace Imran Khan as the Prime Minister accidentally. You tender en masse designations from the Parliament. Then you dissolve Assembly. I mean, Punjab Assembly was the place where he was sitting himself, right? Punjab government was the reason why he had that kind of security. You all of a sudden bulldozed that. Then you also bulldoze the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government as well. These are serious questions, and these are bad choices that PTI kept on making, right? I could have actually listened to what Shandana Gulzar was saying today and thought that it was all some kind of manipulated situation. Had it not been the case that in front of every building that was under attack on May 9th, there were PTI leaders actually very happily vlogging and issuing statements, actually taking credit of what was going on, and actually calling people to move further and attack further. So all these things are bad choices that they made. Now the allegation of digging. This is the problem with anybody who is new to understanding Pakistan's political system. Every political party in the past has repeatedly said that there was a rigging, right? And the biggest problem is that everybody says that where I won, that was legitimate vote, and where I lost, that was rigging, right? Now, my humble submission or question is, if you think that there are such invisible forces that can magically change the verdict in your box, ballot box, why is it that they would stop at only your few constituency? Why do you think that the mandate you got was also not rigged? The only reason is because you always want to project yourself as the popular force and the other one as the unpopular force. With that kind of a situation, all claims can be made. I think that in the end, it all goes to the courts, and the courts, because they have to perform, and then there is so much effort to actually discredit the same courts as well. Don't expect magic there, right? Because in the end, we all are human beings, and we have already talked about the laws that were made, which might be good, which might be bad. Now, I said that I wanted to disagree humbly with what Barrister Safi said, and that is very important also.
Right.
I will not discredit any political party based on merely on this idea that they are very aggressive or they don't want to sit with any other political party. There was an Indian drama called, I think soap opera called Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi, and that means that mother-in-law once was also a daughter-in-law. So today's victim, yesterday's victim become today's victimizers, right?
Right.
The humble summation is that the People's Party used to have a similar kind of role in 1970s. Similarly, when you talk about PMLN in 1990s, they had the similar kind of role. If PTI is behaving in this matter and their leader is sitting behind the bars, I think that I am going to cut them some slack. But the only problem is that keep it civil. Don't throw shoes, right? Don't physically threaten people, because that is the wrong kind of thing that happens. With that kind of a situation, I think in coming days, I think all of them are going to learn to work together. Rafiq.
Right, no doubt about that. I think that karma is something our political parties should learn to believe in. But considering the whole legal scenario as well, I'd like to move towards Barrister Safi Ghauri for this. We've seen that political parties, they take their issues to the courts, and then the courts also face a lot of burden. They face a lot of public opinions going on their judgments, and they see that the people who don't even have as much knowledge as the Supreme Court judges, they would be giving their opinions on whether the judgment is right or wrong, because they would have affiliations or they would support some political party or their narrative that the political party is furthering. But considering the situation in the Supreme Court and considering the high courts and the lower courts as well, the ECP as well, do you think the courts of the country should move towards political arbitration rather than hearing their pleas and appeals and giving their judgments on that?
Thank you very much. So I'm firmly of the opinion that the courts should not be burdening themselves with any political issues whatsoever. The courts have done so to their detriment time and again. And as you rightly pointed out, that not only do they do that, then they are faced with the backlash unlike any that they can imagine, all at the hands of the media. So it's almost like everybody is against the courts. The political parties are against the courts, the media is against the courts, the public opinion is against the courts. But I always say something, and I think this is what's very telling about what's happening with the courts, which is that if you are so against the courts, then why do you keep going back to the courts? Why don't you sit and resolve your issues yourself? If the political parties are so adamant and that the Pakistani courts are not giving them justice. So, for instance, I'll once again point out PTI. PTI is adamant that the courts in Pakistan are corrupt, that the judges are corrupt, yet they keep filing the most cases. So why do they file cases in the courts then? Why don't they just go to the court of public opinion, as they say? Because what they do is, this is what happens every single time with PTI and also with a lot of other parties, but particularly PTI, that they go to a court, they lose the case, then they say we dismiss the court's decision, the court has not given us any justice, we are going to the people, and then they carry out mass ruckus and mass protests everywhere. Even right now, that's what they're doing. The court decisions have not even come out, and they are countrywide protests that are planned. That's what they do. So if countrywide protest is what you're going to do anyways, why not just do it? Why go to the court? What's the point of doing that? And then it's, and because it's their version of justice, right? I mean, they're not going to agree with what the court says unless the court agrees with what their exact version is. Only that is justice. Nothing else can be justice. And we have seen that across all political parties. Now I want to come to the media. Despite various orders by PEMRA, and I think the regulator PEMRA here is also to be blamed to a large degree. The Supreme Court has called PEMRA, it has even summoned DG PEMRA to the court and has asked them to keep a clamp down on these so-called analysts who go around discussing court decisions while the court is dilating on them. If it's a pass and close transaction, it's a different thing. But sometimes the decisions are sub judice. And we see all across Pakistani television people discussing it. PEMRA, despite having been told by the Supreme Court that it is not doing its job, continues to do the same thing. And if PEMRA was not bad enough, then we have PTA, because things are bad on mainstream TV, things are 10 times worse on social media. On social media, everybody is the Chief Justice of Pakistan, and everybody knows more than the Chief Justice of Pakistan. That's a given, right? And when we come from such an educated country where everyone has such in-depth knowledge of law, the fact that the PTA is unable to do anything, we see very sparingly some site getting blocked, somebody getting picked up for things that they're doing. Because I want to be clear here. I'm not against freedom of expression. People should be, of course, free to talk about whatever they want. But in Pakistan, we are faced with a very strange and radical problem. So on social media, we don't see somebody respectfully disagreeing with the court decision. What we see is people threatening judges, people threatening the families of judges, people resorting to violence, people causing violence. In Pakistan, we have seen destruction of life, properties, and the normal freedoms of assembly being misused to harass others. And we've only recently seen, for instance, that case where the woman had some Arabic written on her, and there was a frenzied mob. We have this unfortunate mob mentality where it's very easy to provoke us. So just recently, we have this example of where more than I don't know 500 ulama and muftis misread a court decision. There were public denunciations of that judgment. The Supreme Court of Pakistan issued a press release in a very rare move. The Supreme Court of Pakistan had to issue a press release explaining that they are not saying what you are thinking. This is not the interpretation. This is not what we said. And yet it's not stopped. So the Supreme Court is then inviting them publicly of its own accord to file reviews. What kind of a country are we where the Supreme Court has to invite people to file cases rather than people filing cases themselves? So, of course, at the end of the day, I think we are a very divided and a very polarized society. In this polarization, we need arbiters. The Supreme Court has done its role as an arbiter, but because of the degree of polarization that we have, we continue to malign the one arbiter that we have. So I don't really see things getting better unless we start giving more respect to all the institutions of Pakistan. That means the Supreme Court, that means the parliament, the bureaucracy, the military, the media. All of them need to understand what their boundaries are and then stay in those without maligning others.
Right. Of course, our society needs to establish more discipline and needs to have a greater respect for institutions, political leaders, and a difference of opinion as well. Raja Faisal, what's your views? Because considering we're talking on the legal scenario, the constitutional crisis that the country faces on and off after a few months. In today's speech in the Parliament, Barrister Ghauri talked about and requested the Speaker, actually, the outgoing Speaker, to give a ruling against the ECP because they had not announced their verdict in the case related to the reserved seats. And as we saw earlier in the past, the courts had been given a lot of burden. They had been given undue burden from these parliamentarians, different parliamentarians, to solve their issues. Do you think going to the courts again and again, taking the Parliament's issues to the court, taking these political issues to the courts again and again, is a good move, or is it otherwise?
No, I think, Rafae, if we talk about Barrister Ghauri, I personally like him because his tone and the way he highlights the things and the way he actually, in every aspect when he's talking, even in his political things, there is a wisdom. Yes. And I think we must appreciate the way he has highlighted this issue in the Parliament, because that's the right forum. Why? Yes. Because it shows that he has the trust in the Speaker of the National Assembly, and that's how it should be. What he has done is, being sitting on the obviously opposition benches, he has portrayed that he believes that the National Assembly is the most important forum when it comes to reserved seats, when it comes to their fellow that are still waiting to enter in the Parliament, and the right person to talk to is the Speaker himself. So he has honored the National Assembly as well as he has honored the National Assembly's Speaker as well. That's how it should be. And I think this matter must be resolved, and ECP, I think, I believe so, that would be very soon, resolving this issue. By the way, the things which were being highlighted by Barrister Safi, I fully agree with him. When it comes to social media, I mean, I always say that there only used to be, one barber's shop in a vicinity before, but now everyone has a barber's shop in their hands. So we always used to say that in the barber's shop,
why barber shop, by the way?
Barber's shop, why? Because it is always written there that no political talk is allowed, but you only hear politics there, nothing else. So previously it was just the barber's shop, but now, of course, everyone has a barber's shop in their hand and in shape of social media, and everyone is highlighting something, and that is how the things are going. They must understand that if there is some freedom, that freedom should be facilitated and utilized by themselves with the utmost responsibility. They have to be responsible for their words, for their actions. And when it comes to, of course, a country like Pakistan, where youth bulge is around 67 to 68%, we will be facing these kind of problems. And of course, we are blessed with a kind of youth and a kind of population that is very vibrant. I mean, even on social media, if you deeply look into it, different forums, they are being utilized. Even people who are illiterate, still they are having TikToks and Instagrams and all of these, and they are trying to get in touch with the world. This, in a way, it's good for a nation, but at the same time, they have obviously problems as well that actually come with it. But I think with time we'll learn how to use it. When it comes to slurs being hurled on the people that are sitting on the very top positions, making sure that people at large are facilitated and the state itself is being facilitated. I'm talking about the top people like Chief Justice of Pakistan, like I would say DG ISI, or for the sake of it, Chief of the Army Staff. All of these people And now, of course, we are going to have a political government that is actually coming into the office. They will be facing the same problems as well. But I think somewhere down the line, there should be lines drew that these lines must never be crossed. With your permission, Rafae, I just wanted to highlight earlier, I think around 25 minutes ago,
Yes.
Farrukh highlighted one aspect related to Maulana Fazlur Rahman's politics. With,
I didn't mention
no,
it.
I think you were asked, but
Yeah, I asked him.
yeah,
Yes.
I ducked.
no, I think
I
of
must
course,
have forgotten.
yeah, you must
Yes.
have. My source within JUIF, what he is telling me that the mood this time of Maulana Fazlur Rahman while meeting the other leaders from other parties like MQM, People's Party, NPMLN, when they went to actually meet him at his residence, his mood was entirely different. I asked him
Right.
how you say it. Then he said to me that normally what happens is that in past, whenever somebody came to meet, the first action which was taken at that house was remove all of the vehicles from inside, so that whoever is coming from the outside, they have a
clear
clear a clear place to park inside the house rather than outside. And this is where Maulana used to actually greet them. But this time around, all of the vehicles were getting parked in the street, and they were coming by themselves, and only tier 3, tier 4 kind of leadership of JUIF was actually greeting all of the receiving all of the leaders of different parties. So Maulana Fazlur Rahman is entirely having a different stance, and my source from within the JUIF, he believes that it is not the time for getting something from the government, rather it is time to revive our politics. So JUIF believes that if they stay out of the government and they remain sitting on the opposition benches, then in the future they have their political alive once more.
Right, Raja, Faisal, no doubt about that. There's a change of hearts everywhere, as we can see around. And I'd like to move towards Farrukh Pitafi for the next question. We see that there's change of hearts. It comes with the political dynamics changing overall. In all the parties, we see that, whether it be the Pakistan People's Party, the PMLN, the PTI, which is now merged with the Sunni Ittehad Council. We see the JUIF having a different perspective towards their politics, or even the MQM. However, I'd say that the MQM is still going on the same path that they were before. But considering that, and considering the whole dynamic of the allegations that are being held, there's one dispute that hasn't come to light as much, but it's being heard of, the issue of Form 45s. As Barrister Ghauri also said in the Parliament today, that they have 180 seats according to Form 45, but they have no evidence regarding that. What would you comment on the whole dynamics of the Parliament, the whole political scenario of the country, and all the relationships between the institutions at the moment?
Right, I'm going to talk about institutions, but first I wanted to actually talk about Maulana Fazlur Rahman's change of heart, because Faisal has very poignantly actually mentioned me in that context. Usually I don't criticize Maulana too much directly, because I've known him for quite some time, and there is a mutual respect, right? Yes. But even then, I'm going to just point out 2 or 3 things. One, if he thinks that he is going to somehow benefit by aligning with PTI and get more popular, then he actually is going against the grain. Why? Because in the past, whichever religious party has formed an alliance with PTI, Jamaat-e-Islami being one example, PTI has ended up stealing their thunder.
Their vote.
Right? Repeatedly, those people have entered their lane.
Very true.
But Maulana Fazlur Rahman's, another aspect that really baffles my mind is that when PMLN was in government at the center, at that time, Maulana Fazlur Rahman and his opposition to PTI was like a constant headache. He repeatedly kept on asking me and Nawaz Sharif to overthrow the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government and also try to overthrow the Balochistan government, which was not PTI led, but still he thought that his party should form the government there. And now if he has actually had this change of heart, one has to actually look at recent developments.
True.
One, there were threats against his life, and where did they come from? TTP. Then we suddenly see him visiting Kabul. And in Kabul, word has it that he tried to placate the Afghan Taliban side, and Afghan Taliban are big fans of PTI. So then he comes back and starts angling towards PTI support. So I'm bound to ask, is the tail wagging the dog now? Right? This is one question that I had to ask. But will you allow me? Do we have time?
Yes.
That I can actually talk about media aspect as well. And that is important because I think that usually if you are making a very valid point and nobody is taking it up, then there is something wrong with the system or something is compromised. Recently, we saw that we know which channel actually shills for which business group, right? Recently, and by the way, 190 million pound case there, repeatedly the largest media channel actually kept on talking about Imran Khan, his missus, but there was one man whose name was not mentioned, one media tycoon, real estate tycoon. Amazingly, just before there was indictment in that case, that media house actually brings up this commissioner story and makes it so big that it suddenly becomes, and who is being attacked apart from the election commission, others, it is the Chief Justice of Pakistan as well. And by the way, if you actually topple the judiciary's apple cart, then of course you can find more time to get rid of those cases. Then that issue actually settles down. Then suddenly there is another campaign against the CJ directly involving religion. Am I not within my rights to ask, why is it that these forces are allowed to wreak havoc with the country and then nobody has the courage to even name them? Similarly, when PTI was today PTI is very powerful on social media. Yesterday when they were in power, their narrative was not selling, PDM's was. Before that it was PTI's. Tell me, is this a possibility that essentially whosoever is powerful on social media is neither PTI nor PDM, but they are forces opposed to Pakistan and they keep on hiding behind them?
Right, of course, well, social media is being weaponized and used by certain segments as a tool for furthering their narrative, and rightly pointed out. Unfortunately, we're running short on time, but today's discussion, of course, revolved around the National Assembly session and the overall political dynamics of the country and the politics that will further unfold in the coming days. We'll keep you updated. We'll be talking about the politics, the political situation, the political dynamics, and the constitutional problems that are going on in the country and their resolution as well. With that, we bid farewell to today's episode of the debate. I'd like to thank Barrister Safi Ghauri, who joined us on Skype, very articulate with his views, and I'd also like to thank Raja Faisal, geopolitical analyst, present with us in the studios, and of course senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi.
Let me thank you, Rafae.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Rafae did excellent show today.
Well, it was. It's a pleasure hearing such compliments from my peers. We'll see you again tomorrow, and till then, stay tuned to PTV World.